Hello. For this presentation, we will be going over the collective efficacy plan that I will be delivering at my campus. It is basically a culmination of work that has been done between myself and my focus teacher leader. And a little bit of the context and overview is important because uh, these findings were based originally on the interview that I did with my focus teacher leader, and it was basically taken from the transcript that I got about some of the obstacles that she had faced as a teacher leader, both at our campus and others. Luz Cantu is currently a evening program teacher. For us, she teaches math GED, and during the day she teaches in DCPS. As well, she's had a history of teaching or being in teacher leader roles spanning many years at different schools. The students that we serve in the evening are 18 to 30, and it's a GED program. We're located in Washington, D.C. Leading up to the discussion, and one of the main reasons I wanted to do my focus on her as a leader was because of the discussions that we've had around collective efficacy, in particular, the book Move Your Bus by Ron Clark. And she's given me a lot of good, just kind of good advice, good conversations about how to get buy-in, which is something that I'm always looking for as an administrator. And that came out again in the interview that I did with her, and also within the readings. But some of the like a snapshot of the problem, and kind of some of the feedback that she gave me from the transcript that I pulled out was about data not being data centered. That's something that's very important. And she's had experiences in other schools where administrators were not allowing them, not making decisions based on data, and that was frustrating to her. And so, as an administrator myself, I really thought about how obstacles are created inadvertently by administrators for their teacher leaders. It's important to allow teacher leaders to thrive, and I think those structures need to be in place from an administrative standpoint. But we also talked about relationship building, how important it is for teacher leaders to be respected by their peers, and that can only be done through creating those trust-based relationships. And it talked a lot about kind of the internal motivation of a teacher leader, about how they're when they sign up to be not just one role, they're signing up for a way of life. And I found that to be very kind of altruistic and meaningful and thoughtful. And I know that teacher leaders, it really takes a person that has the not just the skill set, but also that tremendous will to reach over and beyond their classroom. She mentioned that it's about balance, and then getting people to work with you. And so I started thinking also about social capital and how important it is for teacher leaders to have positive social capital. So when I created my recommendations, these were things that kind of led into that. And based on the research, I pulled out and made several recommendations. And each recommendation that I've made, I kind of put the appropriate research that I from the course, as well as thinking about the feedback that she had given me in the discussion that we had in the interview. But the first recommendation is to engage stakeholders and the need to develop teacher leaders. I think this starts with an administrator from the very beginning. Before even doing the work, there has to be kind of the foundation set, and that's about getting the stakeholders on board with this idea of teacher leadership. That's recommendation number one. Recommendation number two is, and this was through the social justice unit with the course. It was about shifting the mindset in administration. We have to get away from hierarchical traditional structures. And I think that's also important before you start doing the work, is to kind of allow administrators to provide the space for teacher leaders to thrive, in particular with social justice as a causal factor, but really just in a lot of other areas that are motivational for teacher leaders, to be able to find that drive to do what they do. The administrators kind of have to get out of the way, provide the supports and the structures, but not the hindrances. And that leads to the next recommendation about being supportive and strategic. And that's going to lay out a plan for encouraging teacher leaders. My problem has been in that it's difficult to find, or for teacher leaders, it's been difficult to promote teacher leadership amongst those who otherwise wouldn't be leaders. I think oftentimes there's a few teachers that rise to the top, such as Luz Cantu, but a lot of times it's like, how do we motivate others to step up and to kind of take the mantle And this semester we're doing a department chair initiative, and so it's actually good timing. But I think it starts with the leadership of management of a campus to set the structures in place. Next thing you need to do is improve communication and transparency. I think this is important just for management in general, but particularly in terms of aligning with teacher leaders, the vision of the school. Communication and transparency is a must, and that's definitely a recommendation. I know from the conversations with Luce, that's one of the issues she had in the past was with kind of conflicts with administrators, and a lot of times it has to do with communication issues. And I think also management of a school needs to respect the work teachers do. And I think this can be empowering to teachers. I think a lot of times the respect may be there, but it's not voiced, and it's certainly not perceived on the part of the teachers themselves. And I think if you do respect the work teachers do, you will see more teacher leaders emerge. I think it's important to also differentiate between what a leader is and what leadership is. A lot of times we have teacher leaders that are appointed in leadership roles, whether it be chairs or other they actually technically are leaders at a campus, but what does it mean to have or exhibit leadership? And I think there's leaders that don't have leadership. And I think there's people that exhibit leadership that aren't necessarily leaders. And that gets into kind of what we talked about with formal and informal roles in the literature. But I think it's important that we differentiate between what it means to be a leader, technically speaking, but also what true leadership can what goes into that, and what do leaders, what are the skills or the actions that people in leadership take, namely reaching beyond their classroom, promoting and collaborating with the other stakeholders in the school to advance the vision of the campus. But I think now moving forward with recommendations, the next one is to establish clear and well-structured professional development plan. This is critical because I think this is going to allow teachers to kind of understand, to reflect over their practice and maybe, feel that there's a safe environment to emerge into leadership. And then I think professional development also will support teacher leaders in areas outside of just traditional content and pedagogy, which is the next recommendation, where it's, what are the other skills that leaders need? And I think that it's important for teacher leaders to be strong teachers, but there are so many other skills beyond content and pedagogy, getting into, soft skills, social capital, and many other areas, communication, that will really are essential for leaders to be effective. Social capital and teacher leaders is something that needs to be developed. In a second, we're going to talk about standards, but I think this is something that teacher leaders should begin to see as a valuable skill, in addition to just what they're doing in the classroom. And I think the research shows this because, again, when we talk about leadership versus leaders, what makes people strong in leadership is those additional forms of capital, in addition to human capital, such as social capital, developmental capital, which make teacher leaders so important to a campus and their ability to mobilize and collaborate with their peers. Have an explicit set of norms or standards as a recommendation. And this is the teacher leader model standards, which I actually was able to provide to my campus. And it was interesting for me because it was the first time that I was able to see like this codified set of standards, and noticing that it's not focused on what a strong teacher would do, but more around what are those things that strong leaders should be able to do. Also be data centered. This is another recommendation. This is something that I found it very interesting that Luce had mentioned in the interview that I did with her. But it's important to be data centered and rooted in the student experience. I've seen from people that are in teacher leader roles that a lot of times they're not so much focused on the student experience or being student centered. Rather, they may have their own individual wants or needs. And I think if you're in leadership, that's kind of one of those things that differentiates that when you're able to look at a campus-wide I guess, improvement or campus-wide initiatives, in particular, focusing on the students of the campus in general. Here are the references that I had. Basically, I tried to pull at least one example of the research from as many different texts that we covered in class, and focusing on what are those skill sets, because when I shared this presentation with my campus, I wanted to be actual, tangible, um, ways that our teacher leaders can exhibit their leadership versus teacher leaders. So I'm excited about this work, and it's going to be very useful for us. I'm very appreciative about the collaboration I have with Luz Cantu as a teacher leader, and I'm looking forward to being able to implement this on my campus. And I'm really grateful for, before this course started, I was aware that there were teacher leaders, but I was never aware that as a thematic concept that teacher leadership was something that existed. I'm excited about it now because I see it as a catalyst for promoting leadership campus-wide, especially among those stakeholders or those faculty members that didn't have the agency to become leaders, or maybe weren't empowered to enter into leadership. So I'm excited about the work that we're doing here, and really excited about these recommendations for my campus. Thank you very much.